What up? What up? What up? What up? Today, January 30th, 2025. 43 days clean today. 44, one or the other. Yeah, I'm counting. Hey, God bless you. Today is going to be on some pretty deep, creepy stuff going on in the world, and it's been going on. We're going to talk about the New World Order. Once again, Agenda 21, Article 201. Stay focused. Don't be distracted because they changed the names around. Here's a brief description of what Agenda 21 is. We are just going to set it off. I ain't going to talk your head off. Let's go.
Agenda 21 is kind of a code name for a master plan originated at the United Nations to change the political and economic system of the world to one of total collectivism. And in order to do that, people must not be allowed to have independence. They must be dependent on the state for everything. Otherwise, they won't be easily controlled by the state. That means they can't have private property, mostly. They cannot have land of their own. They have to live in preferably high-rise apartments that are provided to them by the state as a benefit, so to speak. Oh, good, we got a free apartment. But these people at the top want all humans to be dependent on the largesse of the state. That means that they don't want anybody living out in the boonies. Anybody that's got a couple of acres of land and his own water supply and can grow his own food and that kind of thing, or have some sheep or some chickens, these people are a threat to the collectivist society because they aren't going to go to the politicians and say, please feed me, please clothe me, please give me shelter. They tend to be independent. That's the secret behind Agenda 21. They want people out of the country. They want corporations out there growing all the food and that kind of thing, but they don't want anybody living out there because that way they cannot be controlled. In order to control mankind, we have to get them all into the big cities. We have to rack them up and stack them up, get them dependent on the state for their food, their shelter, their electrical power, their water, everything. That's the dirty secret behind Agenda 21.
That comes from the documentary Unsustainable, the UN's Agenda for World Domination. All right, so keywords: get them dependent on the state for their food, their shelter, their electric, their water, everything. All right.
The biggest in the history of California. I think, has anything bigger than that happened in the whole country ever? It looks like, I don't want to say what it looks like, but you know what I'm going to say. It looks like something hit it. And we won't talk about what hit it, but it is a bad, bad situation. The biggest in the history of California. I think, has anything bigger than that happened in the whole country ever? It looks like, I don't want to say what it looks like.
So my understanding, Trump knows something hit it. It wasn't natural, right? And if you know, you know. Direct energy weapons, HARP, geoengineering, accelerated wind speeds. I'm not saying I know what it is, but we know Agenda 21 has a plan to depopulate, take over land. The Wildlands Project. Remember that term, Wildlands Project. It's open information on the what do you call it, United Nations Forum. You can see it for yourself. Type in Wildlands Project on Google. You might get some.
Looks like, but you know what I'm going to say. It looks like something hit it. And we won't talk about what hit it, but it is a bad, bad situation.
We won't talk about what hit it.
So here's what United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is a real plan. It is a conspiracy, but it is not a theory. It's a conspiracy fact. It was agreed to. It is a United Nations plan agreed to in 1992 by 178 nations, including Ireland, the United States, all the UK, and 178 nations plus the Holy See. It is the comprehensive blueprint. It's the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all energy, all education, all law enforcement, all food production, all information, and all human beings in the world. It is a totally comprehensive plan. It's a completely pervasive plan. It is the plan to inventory and control everything on the planet, including you.
Daddy? Read what she said. No problem, Trump. We'll say it for you. It looks like. Now, isn't that fascinating that that blue stuff is still happening? Anything blue seems to survive these direct energy weapons. Why? I mean, anyone else scratching their heads? And tell me that would not make an awesome album cover. I mean, when your own government comes out and admits to owning laser technology, it's not really a conspiracy anymore. I'm not saying I know what's happening with these fires, but saw that shit.
What the f is that, dude? What? That's it.
Lockheed Martin produces systems that do everything from detect the threats to identify the threats, determine whether it's a threat to the aircraft, and then employs the appropriate weapon, in this case, a laser weapon system.
What we're hearing from our customers is that they need a layered, multi-domain defensive approach that can be integrated across platforms to neutralize these threats across all those domains. Imagine an aircraft equipped with a laser system with the capability to be able to neutralize a threat at the speed of a lightning strike, the precision of a surgical scalpel, with the magazine to deal with a swarm, and with the scalable effect to be able to address that threat, providing an effect all the way the one end from simply deterring it for a short period of time, all the way up to completely neutralizing and defeating that threat.
We were able to integrate our laser weapon system, Athena, into the classified C2 network and receive cues from the radar on the range in order to execute the full kill chain.
The Helios laser weapon system builds on 40 years of combat system engineering and radar excellence. That is a fundamental change for laser weapon systems, which here to date have been prototypes added to a ship. Helios will be integrated into the ship.
So what's exciting about this technology is that it's scalable. It's lived in the laboratory for many years, but has finally reached the power levels and the effectiveness to allow it to be used on the battlefield. As an example, today's laser weapon systems can be used to defeat rockets, artillery, mortars, and even small UAVs. And as that technology and capability scales, the effectiveness scales with it. We'll be to the point here shortly where we'll be able to defend aircraft against incoming missiles and even reach out over long distances and destroy ballistic missile threats.
Laser weapon systems are earning their way onto the battlefield. Lockheed Martin advancements in the fundamental subsystems, be it beam control, high energy laser, beam direction, power and thermal, is bringing a system-of-system approach to our customers' most challenging problem. Lockheed Martin can bring that end-to-end capability into the theater for the life of our platforms and help defend the brave women and men who boldly go in harm's way to defend our freedoms.
Boom. Customers? What our customers are asking for? Who's your customer, sir? What are they really asking for? Anyway, I have a niece, I have a family member that works for Lockheed Martin. She tells me everything. I mean everything. Psych. No, I kid around with her. I'm like, hey, what UFO you working on today? She tells me nothing. Mind your business. This is what she tells me. Good girl. Are we?
This is the first video of Britain's first laser weapon being tested in Scotland. The beam is filmed through a special lens here, but in reality, it's invisible to the naked eye. It's called Dragonfire, and this is what the laser can do. It can hit an object the size of a pound coin from more than a kilometre away. Dragonfire has been developed in the UK at a cost of more than £100 million, but it'll be much cheaper to fire than a traditional missile. This is the first video of Britain's first laser weapon.
Check this out. Tell me what you see. Watch that one more time. What was that? What up?
Can you imagine the power of the sun used as a weapon? It's hard to believe. But during World War II, the Nazis were working on a weapon to do just that, and it was called the sun gun. The sun gun was a proposed weapon of mass destruction that would use the energy of the sun to create an intensely powerful beam of light. German scientists believed that if this weapon were built, it could be used to incinerate cities and potentially entire countries. The sun gun was designed to be a huge, reflective mirror-like structure that would be placed in space, then used to focus the sun's rays onto a target. It was estimated that the sun gun would be able to deliver a beam of light with a temperature of up to 6,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt steel. The Nazis had plans to build a prototype of the weapon, but their plans were never realized. The project was abandoned when the war ended and the Allies took over.
Oh, that's a little bright.
Did you see the blue? Interesting. Did you see the blue? The blue thing survive? What's up with the blue shit surviving? So weird. Okay, y'all remember this? I mean, why aren't you guys questioning this? What's up? I mean, this is not AI. This has been confirmed. I'm pretty sure. I think. Anyway, we know the technology exists at least, right? Pete.
Hey y'all, Myra here. So take a look at this crazy video. This just happened today, May 26th in Chile. So quick backstory, a man was in his apartment and he heard 5 explosions and then his electricity went out. He ran to his balcony to see what was going on or to see if he could see anything, and he happened to catch the 6th explosion. It looks like a laser beam, y'all. A laser beam. Is this some sort of super advanced technology we have no idea about? Is it some sort of government testing? Is like, it looks so futuristic. I'm mind blown a little bit. But there was no explosion. It was just this laser beam hitting a specific location. I have no idea what this is. Tell me what you think. Like, post, comment, repost. Let me know.
Cuando vuelva la luz, va a volver a explotar. Oye, justo hay una micro ahí, weón.
Okay, again, why don't we question this? This is coming straight from the Pentagon. Pete?
They have weaponized space through killer satellites, directed energy weapons, and more in an effort to exploit our systems and chip away at our military advantage.
Directed energy weapons, also known as DEWs, are weapons that deploy a highly focused energy beam, including lasers, microwaves, and particle beams. After decades of research in the United States, defense contractors announced back in 2015 that these systems are expected to come online by 2020, and are currently announcing that they are ready to deploy in the field. Russia, China, India, and the UK are developing directed energy weapons as well, and Iran has had them in use since at least 2013. In 2019, Turkey was the first to officially deploy this technology in combat, when they claimed to have shot down a Chinese-made drone supplied to the Libyan National Army. On September 16th, Defense Secretary Mark Esper announced that China and Russia have already weaponized satellites with directed energy weapons.
Meanwhile, in space, Moscow and Beijing have turned a once peaceful arena into a warfighting domain. They have weaponized space through killer satellites, directed energy weapons, and more in an effort to exploit our systems and chip away at our military advantage.
And for the past few years, many have wondered if these advanced weapon systems have anything to do with the unprecedented fires we have seen in the past few years. Laser-based weapons are able to destroy the target with external heat, and microwave weapons are designed to penetrate the target through external antennas and sensors and ignite the internal electronics, destroying them from the inside out. This could explain how thousands of homes have rapidly burned into their own footprint, while the trees surrounding them survive. And it could explain the several cars we have seen utterly destroyed, with temperatures hot enough to liquefy glass and metal.
Direct energy weapons. They've been around for a very long time. There was a time when the magnifying glass was one of the most deadliest weapons on this earth. If you ever come across this weapon, guaranteed, brother, somebody's getting smoked. This weapon was very simple to use, but the results was deadly. All you needed was the rays from the sun, a giant magnifying glass, and guaranteed somebody's getting slewed. This is somebody using that same method in modern day times. The heat from the sun would be amplified so much that it would melt solid stone. Oh my diddy. So this is another reason why we see all of these melted ruins all over the world.
Bro, nothing new. Nothing new.
Direct energy.
Nothing to see here. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna leave you with Stephen D. Kelly, former CIA NSA contractor, was a laser optics engineer pioneer who worked on high-end military projects, such as the Star Wars program. Below, he'll describe in great detail about types of directed energy weapons. So, enjoy.
Hey there. Alright, I'm making a short video because I'm going to try to share some information about these DEW weapons. That is the big thing everybody's talking about because of the California fires. Alright, now if you don't know, I am a laser pioneer, an electro-optical engineer from way back. I got involved in the laser business back when lasers first came out back in the early 70s. So then I've been involved in the weapons stuff with the CIA and the military for quite a while, especially with this high energy stuff. So Star Wars is nothing new. But I want to educate you because a lot of words are getting thrown around and you need to know all the various different types of systems so you know what hey, it's time. It's time to learn about this stuff. So, first of all, directed energy. Okay, energy explosive destructive force. Okay, obviously a bullet is a device of using gunpowder to create gases to propel a piece of lead through the air to deliver kinetic energy or force to a target. A projectile with an explosive, a missile, obviously it's delivering energy to a target, the explosive being the energy, the destructive energy. A laser or a directed energy device obviously is taking energy and sending it directly to the target without any kind of projectile instantaneously, and the actual projectile is the energy. Okay, so that's a very big difference, very important. Now as far as the what we call directed energy, that falls into a wide variety of devices and wavelengths and what have you, but for the most part we're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. We're not talking about lead flying through the air now. We're talking about light energy, everything from X-rays to gamma rays, visible light, infrared light, UV light, the whole gamut of the electromagnetic spectrums. But let's look at the various different systems. Lasers, first of all, a laser beam can be a continuous beam, which they call CW, which means that it's on all the time, or it can be pulsed, which means it can be on for a split second and has a period of time before it goes back on. And the amount of time that it's on can be very, very short, and the amount of time between when it goes off and on can be very long also. So many systems that are of very high power are of this nature, of the pulsed variety. They deliver pulses that can anywhere be a pico pulse or some very, very tiny, fast pulse of energy. Very extremely large amount of energy in a very short pulse. Most of your weapon systems do that. There are other systems, though, of course, and I want to try to talk about all of them as comprehensively as possible. But the conventional laser, if you go back to a conventional ion beam or a gas system, you're talking about a tube with gas inside, that the gas is activated and it causes light to happen, and it goes back and forth between lenses, which we call a cavity, and when the light reaches a certain frequency, it's able to pass through this lenses through the cavity, and it produces this coherent light, which is the beam. Coherent is very important because coherent basically means it's a straight bunch of rays gathered together. So this way, obviously, all of these things require coherence. Typically, these things may be in a visible spectrum, something you can see, but very often the destructive stuff is going to be a infrared, which is a high number on the electromagnetic spectrum, higher than the visible range, runs from about 400 to 700 nanometers. So your infrared is going to be above 700 and goes up to about 10,000, which is what the body produces, infrared in about 10,000 nanometers, or what we call 1 micron. The stuff that is used for cutting steel and welding is usually a laser that uses CO2 gas to produce infrared light. CO2 lasers are also used in weapon systems. Primarily they were used the Soviets were using them during the Afghanistan war to shoot down the Stinger missiles to help protect their aircraft that were being targeted by the Stinger missiles provided to the Mujahideen by the CIA. But nowadays most of these things are solid state, which means that they're using a semiconductor to produce the light rather than a tube full of gas or some sort of a thing like a CO2 laser. So solid state is a very big thing. A lot of the large weapon systems are also using solid state, and certainly the big lasers that they're using for the fusion experimentation are all solid state also, but typically these are also producing huge amounts of power in a small burst. Another type of laser that's kind of a little old-fashioned but is still out there is a YAG laser, which is essentially a flash lamp or a very bright light that has the light focused via a closed elliptical focusing system onto a ruby rod or something of this nature, which basically absorbs the light through the focusing of the elliptical system and causes it to generate the coherent light necessary to produce the laser. Now, other weapon systems, typically when we talk about the weapon systems that do weapons, this started back in Jimmy Carter. We've had these things since then. The United States, when we first started doing this, we started with the chemical laser weapon systems, which were not the same as the solid state. This was before solid state, and this is certainly after ion, but this is a much different system than an ion laser. This chemical laser is where certain reactive agents, reagent chemicals are mixed together, which cause a chemical reaction, and the energy released by this chemical reaction is what is producing the light, the photons necessary to create the coherent beam, similar to the YAG laser. But the difference is that it's very powerful, but it's somewhat portable, because obviously you can keep chemicals in tanks, and the reason why they were developing this system was because they thought that they could put it on a satellite. So obviously when you're talking about weapon systems, we have ground-based systems, mobile systems, which are certainly obviously being used in California, and then we also have the spaceborne, airborne spaceborne systems that are up on satellite. Now, as I said, the chemical laser was originally developed for a satellite platform, but the problem, of course, is that the amount of reagents that you could store was limited. The ability to go up there and refill the tanks was also questionable. Testing and that sort of thing was questionable. Aiming was questionable. And also, one of the things about a system like this is it requires a very large aperture. In other words, the beam has to be expanded to a relatively large diameter, something like 36 inches or a meter. And then this is put into a focusing lens, which will actually cause the beam to converge at a faraway distance. But in other words, in order to deliver the energy to a focused point rather than a bunch of parallel lines are actually focusing to a point, because that point is where the highest intensity amount of energy is going to be, they need to start by having the beams relatively spread apart before they can do that. So this makes the platform relatively large. Typically they're going to use something like a Newtonian telescope, which will either be a parabolic mirror, concave reflective surface, or something exotic like an aspheric. But these are typically the ones that you're going to be seeing on the airplanes and whatnot. Now, as I said, we've had this stuff since Jimmy Carter, and back in those days, the Russians were doing the same thing. We were developing ground-based systems with the thought of getting them up into space, and we were also they were developing them. They were using primarily a ground-based system. What the Russians did first was they created a big steel tank, essentially a hollow tank, and it had something like a pipe coming out that they were able to aim, and what they would do is they would drop tiny micro nuclear bombs into this tank, and when the nuclear bombs would go off, the X-rays and gamma rays produced would basically focus on each other inside of this tank, much like a laser cavity, and what came out of the pipe would be aimed at the target. And this is very similar to the system that the United States is using. I'll explain how that works, but basically when the United States was able to shoot down Russian satellites by using large chemical lasers, the Russians responded by shooting down our satellites using big giant land-based X-ray lasers. Now again, this was back in probably 70, whatever it was, back when Jimmy Carter was around, long before Ronald Reagan launched his Star Wars initiative. It should be noted that but we didn't go that route. We didn't go the X-ray lasers. However, we did develop a spaceborne X-ray laser system. The system that you hear Judy Wood talking about all the time is a one-time use airborne platform or satellite. And much like the system that the Soviets developed that used small nuclear explosions, a American X-ray laser also uses a small nuclear explosion, but it's a one-time use only. So in other words, when the satellite blows itself up with a small nuclear explosion, there are rods or pipes similar to the system that the Russians had that collimate enough of this energy into beams, and these pipes will be focused at a target like a Chinese military base or a say a building on Twin Towers. Anyway, but that's how that works. Now again, as I said, that's a one-time only use device. So these are very inefficient platforms, and again, the distance that is used is also very, very inefficient. Of course, there is the rod of God, which is a kinetic device, much like a bullet, except that it is coming from up in space, so it's delivering a set with a very, very high speed. But that is a kinetic energy. That is not a directed energy weapon. Now, the platforms that are primarily being used, such as the ones that are being used for the California fires, these, of course, are a chemical laser, as I mentioned earlier, and these chemical lasers are primarily all being built by Northrop Grumman. Back during the 70s and what have you, a lot of these things were being produced by TRW, which I don't think that company is around anymore, and Hughes Aerospace, which obviously is not around anymore. Hughes Aircraft was also involved. They were doing the aiming system, so basically they were responsible for the optics and mechanics necessary to aim the device, and TRW was the company that was producing the chemical laser apparatus. Well, obviously Northrop Grumman now is producing all of this, and I'm sure they contract the optics out to someone like, say, Perkin-Elmer. But certainly these systems are somewhat perfected. They've made them relatively small, meaning that they have a relatively small primary objective aperture, and this is really, when you look at these things, they appear like a large telescope. Of course, we've identified one of the systems like that at the Getty. Often you're going to have something that looks like a large reflective concave lens with a secondary lens in the center, like a Newtonian telescope, and then it will have secondary telescopes, smaller telescopes somewhere on axis, and these will be used for tracking and visual observation of targets. So typically a laser system will have a smaller laser to actually track the target, and then the larger laser or weapon may just be a pulse. On 9/11, of course, not 9/11, but when they shot down the airplanes Flight 800 and Flight 990 and possibly even JFK Jr., they were using a Star Wars device that was not a laser, but it was also a directed energy weapon, and that is a charged particle beam. So certainly protons and electrons are energy, and that, so a device that's shooting electricity or even lightning, if you will, would be in that category of a directed energy weapon. The way these things work, and this technology has been around for quite a while, is they use a basic invisible CO2 laser that is a pulsed beam. They found that a pulse actually works better rather than a continuous beam, and they track the target with this laser, and then they produce a large bolt of electricity which travels up the laser beam the same way electricity travels down a wire and strikes the target. So this is also delivering that energy. This is a very common, very powerful, probably one of the more advanced Star Wars weapons that we are using right now. I will say, as far as the chemical lasers are concerned, when they were first being developed by Hughes and TRW, there was a facility in California out by San Juan Capistrano, right on the outskirts of Camp Pendleton Marine Base, and this is where they first land tested this system, and they were able to shoot down anti-tank missiles that the Marine base was firing out over the ocean as quickly as they could be fired. So it was a very, very effective system, and for the longest time this was our West Coast Star Wars defense. Now, in China Lake, which is of course an inland military base out in the Mojave Desert, not too far from the Capistrano system, the U.S. government, the Navy, installed another chemical laser system similar to the one in San Juan Capistrano, and this thing was at least 10 times more powerful than the one out in San Juan Capistrano. Now that is essentially our West Coast Star Wars. However, we did also install at the same installation a charged particle beam, which is basically a Tesla device which shoots bolts of electricity. Now, East Coast Star Wars, which is, of course is the one that protects supposedly is protecting the East Coast, isn't a big chemical laser, but it is a large charged particle device, and it is actually using beams that are being generated by the particle accelerator nearby Brookhaven National Laboratory, I believe it is, which is right next to, very, very close to the base where this weapon system is, and that is Montauk or Camp Hero, Montauk Point or Camp Hero. And of course these are all underground systems that we're talking about. And the thing about a charged particle beam, though, is that it can actually be aimed and directed and fired and used from an underground system. It'll go right through the earth. So it's really hard to figure out where it comes from, and naturally that's the thing about lightning. People think lightning comes down, but half the time it's going up. But so you have to be aware about that, because these are all weapon system. All of these weapon systems are considered DO weapons, and when we say DO, if it's a word that needs to be explained, because there are any directing energy is, you know, as I said, even a caveman throwing a rock, technically that is a DO device. So, and as I said, the platforms that they're using right now for the chemical lasers platforms, now a lot of images are being shown around right now of a large plane, not a C-130, but a Boeing, some sort of a Boeing jet that's been outfitted with this with a very large chemical laser system on board. It has a big optical device on the front of the nose of this plane, which allows it to aim the beam. And of course, as I said, it has a relatively large aperture, which means that they can focus it to a pinpoint at a relatively large distance. Obviously they need to do this because a straight, coherent, parallel beam isn't going to have the same amount of energy. The problem is that this particular system that we're seeing these photos of was around, I would say, in 1977, 78. It's been around for a while. They used to fly these things out of Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. It's pretty well known. They developed them for taking out ICBM missiles, and from what I understand, it wasn't the most efficient system. They've come up with other more efficient systems for doing this, obviously, but they did look for applications for these weapon systems. Now, one of the things they did do is they took a couple of these Boeings that were outfitted with these lasers and they shipped them off to Israel, and Israel's been using these things for some time now against the Palestinians, which is obviously against the Geneva Convention. But they've been doing it. Now, the weapons that they're using here in California are not the same. I don't believe that they are flying these big Boeings, because obviously that is a pretty strong military thing. But on the other hand, from what I understand, these chemical lasers have gotten pretty portable, and I know they're able to put these things in Humvees, and I certainly know that they're able to put these things on Predator drones, which are actually relatively large. So the Predator drone is probably the most likely platform that's being used for the chemical weapon, or the chemical laser, the DEW weapon that's being pointed at us here in California. Spaceborne, yes, we can use a spaceborne weapon, but again, from an efficiency standpoint, that's not very efficient. It's much easier to take a drone and fill it up with the various chemicals necessary, fly it around, shoot off the laser, and then fly it back and get it ready for more. Certainly a satellite wouldn't be efficient for this. So that's the thing, you know. Okay, I just want you to understand that laser pointers, solid state. Tube lasers, ion lasers, they don't really have them so much anymore. Cutting tools, CO2, these are solid state, but the things that were being looked at now, these are these are chemical lasers. Now, of course, also you got to remember, directed energy could also be in the microwave range, and I'm not talking X-ray, but microwave is like a they call these things area denial devices, and of course these are meant to be, these are considered less than lethal alternatives, or yeah, less than lethal alternatives, I think, are the category they fall into. But the thing is they, again, they build these things with the intention of using them on American citizens, and certainly this isn't right. But I think that's about it. Okay, pretty sure that's about it. Okay, I've got the ion lasers, X-ray lasers, chemical lasers, solid-state lasers, direct particle beams. All right, well, obviously I'd like to talk more about the particle beam system, but suffice it to say that by keeping people stupid and really not knowing anything about any of this stuff, it allows them to get out there and use it. And when we argue about what happened, it really plays into their hands, because in a situation, say like Flight 800 or 990, where a plane went down, yes, they used a laser. Yeah, they could have used a missile. Yes, they could have had explosives on board. They could have done all these things. And the same thing applies to Dr. Judy Wood, who swears that an X-ray laser was used on the Twin Towers. Now, again, remember, we're talking about a nuclear device up in space. This is not the sort of thing they don't put X-ray lasers on drones, because again, these require nuclear explosions to create the energy, the rays, X-rays that they deliver in that kind of lethal dosage. So, but what a point I'm saying is that when she swears that the X-ray laser was the only thing, and some people say it was thermite, and some people say it was a small nuclear device, etc., all these different things that the people swear were going on, it more than likely is there was a little bit of everything there. So yeah, I think that there certainly was a DEW weapon or a X-ray laser being used. Obviously, that particular application, this was not a chemical laser. Now, you know, when you look at what they're being using this for, burning up tanks or melting ICBMs is probably a little harder than igniting wooden houses and commercial buildings that aren't moving on the ground. So in other words, these devices that were built for very important strategic task of protecting our country are now being used for the overkill of us. So anyway, all right, you guys, I hope this was helpful, and happy Thanksgiving. All right, thank you.